second front of political battles is breaking out in Germany, where public discontent is escalating into a real political crisis. Comedians, journalists, and ordinary citizens are increasingly joking that Germany has the most incompetent government team in the world. Friends, today we will analyze a very hot material. A real scandal broke out on German television. Olaf Scholz, speaking to citizens, found himself face-to-face with an elderly German who openly asked him some uncomfortable questions. The man asked if it was time for German politicians, including Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock, to take advanced training courses. The whole room exploded with laughter, and the Chancellor's response turned out to be so ridiculous that discussions of this episode are still ongoing. I promise that you will like the video. We will not delay. We are starting. Let's dive into the context of the situation a bit. In Germany, political reality increasingly resembles a play in the genre of the absurd. Olaf Scholz continues to assure everyone of the brilliant prospects of his policy. He recently stated that Germany will become climate neutral by the middle of the century. But for this, of course, you need to be a little patient. Against the background of such statements, the country's industry is experiencing a deep crisis. Every week, dozens of companies declare bankruptcy, jobs are being cut, and energy bills are rising. Economists are sounding the alarm, but for the country's leadership, it seems that these problems remain beyond attention. The elections are just around the corner, and the Svetofor coalition is literally bursting at the seams. The parties are urgently changing their slogans in order to regain the trust of the voters. What until recently was considered the rhetoric of the extreme right, from Alternative for Germany or Sarah Wagenknecht's new party, is now being actively broadcast by the Social Democrats and Christian Democrats. An example of this is Armin Laschet, the head of the CDU, who just a couple of weeks ago threatened Moscow with ultimatums, and now declares that not negotiating with Putin is irresponsible. New elections, as they say, require new views. But the political flexibility does not end there. There are more and more calls for the return of nuclear energy, which until recently the Greens proclaimed a relic of the past. Coal-fired power plants, solemnly closed for the sake of compliance with climate standards, can also return to operation. Energy expert Hans Werner Zehn ironically remarks, when electricity bills exceed half of the salary and the industry massively shifts production abroad, people begin to realize that rooftop solar panels are not a panacea. At the same time, foreign policy raises no less questions. Annalena Baerbock's recent trip to China, presented as a peacekeeping mission, in reality turned out to be more of a symbolic gesture for an internal audience. Political scientist Christian Hake sarcastically noted, Baerbock is trying to portray herself as a heavyweight in global diplomacy, but her visit to China looks more like a report to the voters than a real attempt to resolve conflicts. The internal agenda is also full of conflicts. Politicians who until recently enthusiastically defended the ideas of multiculturalism and open borders are now vying to promise tougher migration policies, control flows, and even deport illegal migrants. Migration policy expert Harold Weiss quips, when public discontent reaches a critical point, politicians start changing their shoes on the fly, forgetting that it was they who created this problem. Germany today is a country on the verge of change. But so far the changes look more like chaos than order. Politicians are fighting for a place in the sun, forgetting that the future of millions of citizens is at stake, for whom patience has long become an unacceptable luxury. Olaf Scholz and his election program increasingly resemble a collection of ambitions without real content. We will put things in order in the second term, the Chancellor declares. Does this mean that the first term was just a workout? Or is it an admission that nothing significant has been achieved in 3 years? Economist Michael Hubner sarcastically notes, if the order according to Scholz means massive bankruptcy, job losses, and an energy crisis, then his policies really deserve applause. Before the elections, the Social Democrats are trying to portray concern for the people. One of the key promises is to raise the minimum wage to €15 per hour. However, Scholz had previously solemnly assured that he would not interfere with the work of the Minimum Wage Commission. Old promises seem to have been forgotten because it's so convenient to make new, more resonant ones. We will save jobs, the Chancellor declares, ignoring the thousands of employees of major companies such as Bosch, BMW, and Volkswagen who have already lost their jobs. And what about the pensioners? As always, they are scared. Without the SPD, pensions may decrease, they say from the screens. As sociologist Ursula Mueller notes, bullying the older generation is a win-win strategy. Completing the picture is the old promise of building new housing. This idea is heard at every election, but it is already so boring that it is perceived more as a joke than a real initiative. Watching this parade of electoral absurdity, one can't help but wonder, how much are voters willing to believe everything they are promised? Politics in Germany is becoming more and more predictable. Before elections, candidates say what people want to hear, and after that they return to their usual routine. As one German blogger noted, election slogans are bedtime stories for adults. Germany today resembles a ship that has lost its course. Water is flooding the deck, cracks are growing in the side, but the crew on the bridge seems to prefer to discuss the beauty of the horizon. How long this will last will be shown by the elections. In the meantime, we can only wonder at the artistry of German politicians, who manage to turn the crisis into a one-actor theater. Friends, we are about to hear two sharp and straightforward questions from a German pensioner addressed to Olaf Scholz, as well as the Chancellor's own answer, which will undoubtedly shock you. Pensioners quote, "I'm worried that you're too forgetful. People are already talking about this abroad, saying that you have a chancellor with amnesia. It really makes me uneasy. What do you take away from today's meeting? How can we be sure that you're not so forgetful after all?" It's not just comedians who say that Germany is the country with the stupidest government in the world. This is a rude expression, but it seems to me that this is not entirely true, although there are really a lot of people in your office who can do absolutely nothing. You have a Habeck who doesn't even know what bankruptcy is. Then there is Baerbock, who calls tanks Napoleon, and the countries located 100,000 kilometers away are our closest neighbors. She also says that Putin must turn 360 degrees. This is all alarming. I would like to ask you, do you have no influence on this? Then either you have to fire them or send them to additional training courses. In practical work, these people don't understand what they're doing anyway. This can be seen by the way they write laws which only create problems in the end. And I would like to hear from you what will be done, resignation or dismissal. In any case, something needs to be done. Otherwise, we will look like fools in the eyes of the whole world. Scholz's answer, well, it all had to be said. That's why I want to tell you. I think the ministers you mentioned are doing a good job and putting a lot of effort into helping the world stick together. As for your first question, I remember what I remember, and I'm not going to invent anything for the sake of someone's political wishes. I cannot represent anything that does not correspond to reality, and I will adhere to this principle, since the truth requires it. Scholz's answer caused confusion among many. His unwillingness to respond to the obvious shortcomings in the work of the cabinet of ministers only reinforced the view that the country's political leadership is divorced from reality. Against this background, the opinion of Alice Weidel, leader of the Alternative for Germany party and candidate for federal chancellor, becomes extremely interesting. She suggested taking a deeper look at the economic situation in Germany and its causes. Quote from Alice Weidel, "To understand what is happening with the German economy, we need to understand the value chain. Imagine that energy is stored at each stage of production. This means that if you have the highest energy prices, then these costs accumulate. In addition, they are subject to an energy tax and maximum prices set by the state, followed by an absolutely unconstitutional fictitious emissions tax. Other countries don't do this at all. And here it affects every stage of production." These words sound like an alarm signal for the German economy. High energy prices and absurd tax pressures make German companies uncompetitive in the global market. Many enterprises are moving production to other countries where conditions are more favorable. Instead of solving the problems, the German government continues to ignore reality. This dialogue between the pensioner and Chancellor Scholz is a vivid reflection of the citizens' distrust of the current political course. The outcome of the current situation is obvious. Due to the rapid rise in prices, German companies are losing their competitiveness. Many of them are forced to close or move production abroad. The high cost of energy, artificially inflated by taxes and green policies, makes their existence impossible. On the other hand, ordinary citizens are facing a decline in purchasing power. People notice that their earnings no longer cover basic expenses. Prices are rising, and inflation is turning even basic necessities into luxuries. Often both adults work in the family, but even this is not enough for a normal life. Rents are rising, groceries are becoming more expensive, and transportation is becoming unavailable due to high fuel prices. Who can afford to refuel a car at current prices today? This rise in price is largely caused by the green ideology, which aims to make harmful forms of consumption economically unprofitable. They seek to remove these products and services from the market not by banning them, but by making them inaccessible to the average person. Economy Minister Robert Habeck is proud to announce a 25% reduction in emissions. But the real reason is the closure of enterprises and the shutdown of production. Buyers, automakers, and other large companies are shutting down their production facilities. Quote from Weidel, "Less emissions? Of course, the industry was destroyed. Machines stop, production is reduced, jobs disappear. People are left with nothing. The situation is justifiably alarming." Alice Weidel, speaking in the Bundestag, proposed specific reforms that her Alternative for Germany party is ready to implement during the first 100 days of the new government. Weidel names the main measures that, in her opinion, can pull the country out of the crisis. Restarting nuclear power plants will ensure the stability of the energy system and reduce the cost of electricity. Tax reduction, the abolition of VAT on energy and simplification of the tax system. Ending the emissions tax. This unjustified levy only increases the cost of production. The return of coal-fired power is a temporary solution to stabilize the energy market. The purchase of cheap gas from Russia is the restoration of relations to ensure affordable resources. Migration control. Since 2015, Germany has hosted more than 6 million people, many of whom are not even registered. The country needs strict border control and stricter migration policy. According to statistics, 41% of German journalists support the Greens. This is reflected in the lopsided presentation of information and support for policies leading to a crisis. Weidel warns, starting in January, the media campaign against Alternative for Germany will begin. False accusations and fabrications will spread. But I take it calmly. The truth is on our side. Germany is facing a systemic crisis that affects both the economy and the daily lives of its citizens. Policies based on utopian green ideas are destroying industry, leading to unemployment and making people's lives unbearably expensive. And while the AfD is offering its solutions, representatives of the ruling coalition continue to surprise with statements and decisions that raise more and more questions from citizens. Annalena Baerbock, the German foreign minister, once again noted the prescient statements. She called the rejection of Russian gas a manifestation of courage. Admittedly, it really takes courage to drive a country's economy into a deep crisis and then proudly announce it as a great achievement. The closure of nuclear power plants, the abandonment of cheap gas, and tax increases are all aimed at a green revolution, according to the coalition. In fact, the industry is on the verge of destruction. Every week enterprises are closed, thousands of workers are out of work. The Minister of Economy, Robert Habeck, deserves a special mention. His contributions to the revolution include banning internal combustion engines, shutting down nuclear power plants, and increasing taxes on emissions. He is particularly supportive of the German car industry, complicating relations with China, a key partner for this industry. At a time when the economy is bursting at the seams, German citizens are being offered a new law on heating. Now you can keep warm not only with high taxes, but also with the warmth of realizing how the government cares about the environment. People seem to have been completely forgotten. Baerbock claims that Germany knows how to unite. This is true, but not around ideas, but rather against the government. The coalition's rating of 14% speaks for itself. In the eastern lands, citizens are voting en masse for the AfD, deciding that with allies like Baerbock and Habeck, enemies are not needed. Friends, how do you think the lives of Germans can be improved now? In my opinion, the answer is obvious. Don't touch anything, and that will be progress. Over the past 3 years, The government has failed to implement a single initiative that would bring noticeable improvements. It seems that every morning the ministers start with the question, how can we make it worse? Economists call the coalition's energy policy an experiment in survival, where it is not the ministers who have to survive, but ordinary citizens. Despite the social tension, the crisis of industry and energy, the representatives of the coalition are confident in their effectiveness. Perhaps, in their reality, the destruction of industry and social stability is a success. If Germany had held a contest for the most memorable political performance, the coalition of Baerbock, Habeck, and Scholz would have won first place. This material raises very important and pressing issues that have long been overdue in German society. I want to thank the pensioner who was not afraid to ask Olaf Scholz such direct and uncomfortable questions that concern us all. This moment clearly showed how tired people are of reforms that only create new problems instead of helping. Friends from Germany, how are you doing? Do you feel the consequences of government decisions in your daily life? It is very interesting to know your opinion. Thank you for your attention, dear viewers. I wish you good health. See you later.